Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Friedman. It's Gimel Tammuz today. So naturally, it's a day that Chassidim have a feeling of connection and zuchtai anemes vort. And we decided in וחום, when we were preparing this broadcast, these series of shiurim and lectures and talks, maybe get down to the real, the Yisrael of the Indian of Iskashus. You say this of an Indian from the Rebbe, what's the Indian of a Rebbe, what's the Indian of Iskashus, why one needs a Rebbe, and so on and so forth. To clarify this topic, that a young boy, a young girl, an old boy, an old girl, a man, a middle-aged young man, and an older man, we should have clarity in this Indian. And once and for all, Taka, to put it out mit Hasberim, to clarify it. What is it based on? What does it mean? And what does it mean for, and the takeaway for us, the pale mamish. So I want to thank you, first of all, for agreeing to do this. And my name is Rabbi Yisrael Spolter from Western Florida. I'm doing this together with Rabbi Friedman today. And so let's get started right away. Let's get into it. Rebbe Gimel Tammuz. Naturally, we're looking for Iskashus today. What is a Rebbe? Why is there a need for a Rebbe? Rabbi Friedman.
You know, the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya, as from what we're told, it's because he needed to answer a fundamental question. The Torah says it is very natural for every Jew to love God, but it doesn't seem to be the case. It's a very fundamental, basic question. So the Rebbe, Alter Rebbe, started Hasidus Chabad and wrote the Tanya in order to explain what happened to that Ahava. What happened to that love? So in order to make it a complete answer, you have to explain two things. What is a Jew and what is God? Because the statement is that a Jew naturally loves God. So if it's not working, is either you don't understand what a Jew is, or you don't understand what the Eibishter is, what God is, or maybe both. Loiha v'loiha. So the Rebbe in Tanya explains what is a Jew. That's the first part of Tanya. And that explains what is God, the second part of Tanya.
What?
The point is that we have to bring the two together. In order to bring the two together, you need a Rebbe. You need a Moshe Rabbeinu. And I think that that's the meaning of Vayaminu b'Hashem u'b'Moshe Avdei. What do you have to believe about Hashem? They saw him. What do they have to believe? You have to believe that he is much closer to you than you think. Because Emunah generally puts the Eibishter up in heaven. Distant. Romal kol goyim Hashem. That's the nature of Emunah. But to make the Emunah pnimisdik Emunah, what you really have to believe is that the Eibishter is much closer than you think. From the other hand, what does it mean to believe in Moshe Rabbeinu? You think you know Moshe Rabbeinu, you have to believe that you don't begin to know Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, you don't know how close, how much the Eibishter let himself down, and you don't know how high a Jew is. So what is a mamutza? To bring the two together, you have to have somebody who can show you who you are, because you have no idea how high you are. And you have to show how the Eibishter is how the Eibishter has led himself into every prat and into every detail of your life.
And how does that happen? Through what? So he's saying that the Rebbe, the Moshe Rabbeinu, is the one that brings, is megala by a yid, the inyan of Elokus, reveals in what the Eibishter in the world, and he also reveals how high a yid can be. What's the inyan of a Rebbe that does that makes that connection?
I don't know. I don't know what the mystical side of it is. But in terms of teacher and in terms of role model, this is what the Rebbe taught us, and this is what the Rebbe modeled for us. The derech eretz, endless derech eretz for a Jew, the endless respect for what a Jew is, and the immanence, the closeness of the Eibishter with his world, with his creation.
So I always understood that one of the inyanim of a Rebbe is that Anoshim Kerkeinu, people like us who are Sheikh Nebate Chemer, in other words, we are Gashim Dike, very little sensitivity and Ruchnis Dike connection upon him, at least Begoli. The Rebbe is as a Yid, as by him, the inyan of Elokus is bemuchish, the Goli Mamish in his life. It's zayin neshama, it's zayin kindem, it's zayin his darge. And when we see a Yid Olamata that has that kind of Elokus, the connection to Elokus, the muchish, so real and so vivid, das macht bei uns, that makes the Eibishter close, that makes the Eibishter real for us. That makes the Eibishter real for us. So obviously, what that means is that we're getting into inyanim that of the neshamas. In other words, neshama of the Rebbe. He says, obviously, the Rebbe is on an infinitely higher target than the rest of the people. And that's why that neshama, which is on the highest level, when it comes down in a group, comes down over here, and we see this kind of gilui.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
We see this person, this Rebbe, so the Elokus becomes a reality for us. Mizet vadas main. And you see a Yid that was pushed to the Eibishter b'tachlis, so it makes the Eibishter closer for us. What that means is l'cheira that the emphasis that you mentioned the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe talks about that in Tanya. He says that the inyan of Moshe Rabbeinu, the inyan of the tzaddik Yisei Delam, which we call the Rebbe, is neshama. It relates to his dargas on neshama, which is, be'emes we all come. All the neshamas come from one source, but by the Rebbe, the neshama has not. By us, the neshama went through a big yerida, through the elements, through Atzilus, Bri, Yetzirah, Nasiyah. We were greatly affected by it. But by the Rebbe, it was not affected because das pshat and neshama the Atzilus, or even higher. Is that the Nakud? Is that one of the inyanim over here? In other words, that's and is that also why it's impossible to have a connection to the Eibishter beside on the Rebbe? Because the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya in the second period that like a child, that every part of his body lives because of his own brain, and through his own brain is connected to his father's brain. There's no other way. In other words, you can't go have a connection to the father outside of your own brain. So a little. So that's the Nakud over here. So that's what we need a Rebbe, because without that we can't connect to the Eibishter. And the fact that the Rebbe is the inyan of Chochmah Atzilus, the Rebbe is Neshama, the Darga of Atzilus, is what makes it possible for us, and he's in a Guf Gash, makes it possible for us to have not an understanding, but to experience Elokus.
That's probably the explanation. How does the Rebbe do what he does? Because he is that neshama, and he has that closeness, and he can model it. So I was thinking more about the practical result, that a person can be frum, can even be chassidish, with all the hidurim, and with all the chumras, and with all the edelkeit, but without the Eibishter. The Eibishter is not his reality. His reality is kedusha, edelkeit, frumkeit, mitzvahs. It's a lifestyle, and it's a good lifestyle, and it's an important lifestyle, and he's very devoted to that lifestyle. But it's without an Eibishter. God is not an essential part of it. It's almost like part of Yiddishkeit is that you believe that there's an Eibishter. So, since I'm a good Jew, and I do what a Jew is supposed to do, so I believe that there's an Eibishter. I actually had this conversation with somebody. I said, do you believe in Hashgacha Pratis? He says, sure. I said, so what happened to you last week was coming from the Eibishter? He says, I don't know. I said, we're going to try this again. You believe in Hashgacha Pratis? He says, yeah. I said, so what happened to you last week was coming from the Eibishter? He says, how am I supposed to know that? He said, I'd like to believe it, but I don't know. He says, so what do you mean when you say that you believe in Hashgacha Pratis? He says, that's my emunah. That's my emunah. What's the reality? So to bring the Shechina down sounds like a very mystical project. It's not. It's not mystical. Either the Eibishter is real to you, or he's not. Is he causing what's going on in your life, or you just believe he does?
You're saying that reality, that it shouldn't remain an amunah, a makivdik amunah, encompassing amunah, that doesn't penetrate you, that it's not your reality. That happens only through the Rebbe.
And it doesn't happen mystically. It's not like the Rebbe puts his hands on your head and all of a sudden you believe in the Eibishter.
How does that happen?
The Rebbe explains it. The Rebbe brings it down in Asius, in words, in simple logic. How could it be otherwise? It becomes real. You know, the Shalmotcha Rebashkin is a hero in the yeshiva world. He wouldn't walk Daled Amos without his talis cotton, even though they beat him. Where does that come from? Why is it that hardly any yeshiva bacher would be that way? You're in the police station. They've got you. You know they're going to beat you up. They're looking for an excuses to beat you up. They told you to walk to the office. What do you mean you won't go without a talis cotton? That comes from frumkeit. Not really. Comes from emunah. Not really. Mitzad emunah, he would find a heter for everything. Why? I believe that the Eibishter knows what's going on with me, and he understands that this is not b'ritzaini, and that I'm an onus. B'meileh, I can go without a talis cotton. The emunah would give him the heter.
Right.
The reason he wouldn't go is because of what his reality is. What's real? A court, a judge, a policeman. That's real. What they say is real. Or what the Eibishter says is real. So the Eibishter says you don't walk daladamas. So what? This is a bal machlekes on the Eibishter?
So let me verstehen. Me understand. You're saying you're being mamchish over here. You're describing a person who the Eibishter is the reality in the alakus b'kshitas, as we call it in the Siddish lingo, and probably what are you saying that where did Azai Yid get such a pshitis, such a odd that the Eibishter is his reality? He got that from being Mekusha and connected to the Rebbe. So the question is, the question then is, what is it about the Rebbe that gives you that? In other words, why can't that become a reality? I don't want to say anything wrong, but why can't that be the reality of a Yid on this Kashas from Rebbe? In other words, what's the Yisayid over here?
In simple language, you can say it Pashut. If I can't believe that Moshe Rabbeinu is the mouth of the Eibishter, in other words, if I can't believe that the Eibishter speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu, then I can't believe in an Eibishter that is real.
One can believe that the Eibishter talks to Moshe Rabbeinu as he needs a mouthpiece. He needs someone to give over the message. So he has a messenger. He gave over the message, Yashakeach, and now we know what the message is, and we know what to do. What's vital?
Fine. So the reality of a lakus has to start in somebody. In other words, you have to see God in this world. Where are you going to see him? In the streets? That would be a very high madrega. But how does it begin? First, you see it in an ishalikim. If you can't see that, then the Eibishter is completely in Himmel and he has nothing to do with you.
Why can't I be that ishalikim yichab neshama? Every Yid has a chelik alakam in mal mamish.
Go for it. Start taking kriplach.
No, I know that I'm asking the question because why taka up here in Hasbara Asus? Why taka is there only one such person in a generation?
The emes is it's not negeya. Halavai, there should be one. Halavai, you should recognize that there is one and who that is. Why there's only one?
Yeah.
There's only one Moshe Rabbeinu.
Yeah.
I don't know. What's negeya? The shayla is like,
you're saying that's what the Eibishter made, and that's how it is.
Well, it doesn't bother me. Ich suche nicht kein Zweiten.
No, I
In fact, that might be a little confusing. Just like there's Hashem Echad, then there has to be a Moshe Echad.
Oh, but we halten mitten mit Pashas Keirach. Isn't that the etzem what Keirach said? Kulam Gedeshim. Yeah, there ain't no hat an neshama. So what's the answer to that?
The answer is you're such a yod. You think you're so smart that you figured out that every Jew is holy. Who taught you that? How do you come to understand that and to appreciate that? Because Moshe Rabbeinu showed you that. Oh, jetzt bist du geworden Sam Sapozhnik. Now you're on your own. In other words, that Edelkeit itself comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. So that's the other half of it. Moshe Rabbeinu makes the Eibishter real and makes the Jews awesome. The Moshe. There's no subject, there's no topic in any field that the Rebbe didn't revolutionize. Once the Rebbe explains something, it's completely different from what we thought before. One of the big chidushim is, what does it mean that you have a neshama? What's a neshama? What's a nefesh elikis? What is a chelek elokah mimal? The way the Rebbe sees it, you never saw it before. Moshe, I was just reading a sikha from the Friedman Rebbe, from the Rebbe, on this parsha. What does it mean? Nase shutif im HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'maisa bereishis. What? When you heard it the first time, what did you think? The Eibishter created the world, the Eibishter runs the world, and you're his assistant. You carry the hammer for him. How are you a shutif? The Rebbe says a shutif means 50-50. Sometimes one shutif is right, and sometimes the other shutif is right. Do you hear this?
It's a Friedman Rebbe sicher.
No, the Rebbe.
The Rebbe, yeah.
And that's what it means, not tzchuni bonai, not tzchuni. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes you're right. But the Iker Chidush, in the last Maimer that the Rebbe gave out, where the Rebbe says, the Eibishter wants a dira b'tachteinen. Right? That's what we're always taught. We're serving the Eibishter by making a dira b'tachteinen, making this world his dwelling place, because that's what he wants. He wants a dwelling place, nesava liyes le'dira. And who are we? We carry it out like we're the hands and the feet to make the dira b'tachteinen. The Rebbe says no. Because you are a chelek elokah mimal, you want the dira b'tachtenim as much as he does. And when the dira b'tachtenim is not complete, you're shattered by it. Ganzen zertreißelt. Because you're a chelek elokah mimal. So it's not he wants a dira b'tachtenim and you're hired to be the carpenter. It puts a Jew on such an amazing, unbelievable level. If we don't know this, then it doesn't really make sense to stop somebody in the street and ask him to put on film. That itself needs to be understood and appreciated. What does it mean, stop a Jew and put on tefillin with him? And for this you'll get rewarded. No. This is the emes, Eibishter is emes, Torah emes, a Jew is emes. It's the whole story. And that's why people who say it's an outreach project. An outreach project. It is the truest part of the Jew from the truest part of the Eibishter and the truest part of Torah. We didn't know this before the Rebbe. What the Rebbe thinks of you, nobody else thinks of. Nobody else thinks so highly of you. Nobody.
Yeah.
And that can only come from that which is the most essential core reality. Because there, all the details fall away. There's another thing I would suggest.
Uh-huh.
There's another thing. Every relationship, and what we call hiskashrus to the Rebbe, every relationship has to be two ways. Only the Rebbe was able to show how loyal a Jew is to God and how loyal God is to the Jew. These were both not known before the Rebbe. Like, for example, why do we sing Shira? Why do the Jews sing praises at Kriyas Yamsuf and not at other miracles? When the food came from heaven, the miracle of Hanukkah, the miracle of Purim, where are the songs? So listen to what the Rebbe says. The reason we sang by Kriyas Yamsuf is not because it was a bigger miracle, but in this miracle, God asked nothing of us. He did it all himself. Hashem yilochem lochem va'atem tacharishim. So what are we singing? Not because, wow, what a miracle. That's so artificial. It's the closeness. You did it all for me? Didn't even ask me to participate? In the miracle of Hanukkah, you had to fight back a little bit. A little bit. The miracle of Purim, you had to stand up and do something. Here, garnish, not even be mispala. Don't even say Tehillim. That famous joke. Don't even say Tehillim. So what is the Rebbe saying? The Rebbe is saying our relationship with the Eibishter is not, he's big, he's strong, he can do amazing things. And we're so happy. What are you happy about? What are you happy about? That the Eibishter can make a Kriyas Yamsuf makes you happy. This is what you're singing. It's so much more personal. You're singing because of the closeness, not because of the bigness of the miracle. So here's the point. To be mekusha to a Rebbe, the Rebbe has to invite you. You can't just decide, ich will werden a mekusha. Who invited you? Wer will dir? If you say, I can be devoted to the Rebbe with all my heart and soul, with every string of my being, how can you do that? If he doesn't invite that kind of closeness, then you can't. Then you can't.
Where's the invitation?
So that's why there's a difference between going to any other oihel or any other holy place versus going to the Rebbe. The Rebbe, being the Rebbe of our generation, you are important to him. Or this Lubavitcher younger man said, I dropped out, I'm not a Lubavitcher anymore. I said, you can't do that. How can you do that? If you're not doing what you're supposed to do, who do you think they're going to blame in heaven? Your Rebbe. So you can't just walk away and say it's over. It's not over. As far as the Rebbe is concerned, you are his chassid, and he is responsible for you. You don't want to play anymore? This was not a game. So you can't say, I'm not a Lubavitcher because I don't want. But you leave the Rebbe, with the responsibility for you. On the other hand, you can't just say, I am a Lubavitcher because I want. Who wants you? So now we say that every Talmud in Tomchet Mimim, the Rebbe Rashab already approved. It's with the Heskem of it. Heskem is not the same as being your Rebbe. So there are two things here, and it's awesome.
You're saying that the Rebbe Rashab, which in Tracht, that was the invitation? Is that what you're saying?
No, that was a distant invitation.
Yeah.
We're talking about an immediate. So by the Rebbe, it's not he's maskim. He is a Rebbe because he's your Rebbe. So to him, this is not negotiable. He can't walk away. So you can't walk away either.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, what it means, that even the Poshim, the ones who deny, huh?
Poshim made them, yeah.
In Moshe Rabbeinu, even they get their hashpah from Moshe Rabbeinu, because he never stopped.
So in other words,
doing your half.
So you're touching now on a point that is really a yid. The etzem, you're saying, is mekusher to the Amish, through Moshe Rebbe. He's mekusher to the Moshe Rebbe, to the Rebbe. Whether he
from
knows,
the Rebbe's side.
From the Rebbe's side, obviously, because he's a peshe, he's a merit. But I'm talking about from the Rebbe's side, he has no choice. Just says that from this point of view, the Rebbe is the Rebbe of Gans Klal Yisrael, in other words. But here we're talking about the kesher from the Rebbe to every single yid. And that comes mitzad what? Mitzad the fact that he's neshama klolis.
Of this generation.
This generation. Could we elaborate on that for a minute, what that means on neshama klolis? Was heißt das Punkt?
Let's just put it in very, very simple language. One person is responsible for his generation. Tzaddik Yesod Olam is Lashon Yochid. There's one tzaddik that takes full responsibility for a generation. And there's no debate, there's no question. No one wants that responsibility. So you can't just pick on any Talmud Chacham and say, oh, he is the one. He doesn't want it. He can't do it. And that's, don't do him no favors. He doesn't. Only the Rebbe took that responsibility. So the point of going to the Ohel is, it's not you're looking for somebody holy that will daven for you. You're going to where you are needed, to where you count. You're going to the person who is responsible for you, who takes you on his shoulder, whether you want to or not. But he does. So you go to the Ohel, it's not like going to Stam, a holy place, which is awesome. But you go, let's say, to the Rambam, the Rosh Yeshiva in Montreal, Rabbi Isaac Shrei, was telling us that he was in Eretz Yisrael as a bocher, I think, and he went to the Rambam. He said, do you hear what I'm telling you? I was by the Rambam. And nothing. I didn't change. He said, how is that even possible? I was by the Rambam. It was, it was a very, very exciting, but nicht mein Rebbe, which means the Rambam didn't actually sit there waiting for you to come. He wasn't thrilled to see you. The Rebbe is. So I think the crucial point here is there are tzaddikim who had great avas Yisrael, without any doubt. The Baditchever, his avas Yisrael was the Alter Rebbe at the end of Yom Kippur would wait for the Baditchever to start Ma'ariv. Why? That the year should begin with the Baditchever's Vuhu Rachum. That's awesome. So the Baditchever said that when he goes to Gan Eden, he will refuse to enter until Mashiach comes. In the end, he did. He did go into Gan Eden because it's irresistible. But the Rebbe is not going to go into Gan Eden. Not because he has a greater Avas Yisrael. We're not going to compare who has more Avas Yisrael. The Baditchever's life here on earth was Gan Eden-dik. Right? Himmel was his type. What is Gan Eden? It's a garden of pleasure. Right? A Himmeldikke pleasure. That pleasure was his life when he was here also. Since that was his whole life, when he got that close to Gan Eden, it was hard to resist. By the Rebbe, a Rebbe, Gan Eden is not appealing. Never. Dira b'tachteinim. Since the Eibishter wants a dira b'tachteinim, so to the Rebbe, Gan Eden means nothing. It's not even interesting. It's not tempting at all. So the Rebbe says, I'm not going to go into Gan Eden. He's not going into Gan Eden. And it's not Mesiras Nefesh on his part. Today, 26 years later, the only thing that gives the Rebbe pleasure is dira b'tachteinim. So when you go ahead. So when you come to the Rebbe about a dira b'tachteinim problem, tachteinim she'ein tachten l'mata himen. When you come to the Rebbe with a problem in your toe, or in your stomach, or in your bank account, he is just as committed and concerned and understands it as well as he did 40 years ago. Whereas the other tzaddikim, once they're in Gan Eden, you're belly aching and it's hard to relate to. But by the Rebbe, nothing changed.
So two questions. Number one, and this nakud is that why is that negaya? Why is that connected mainly to the union of the one Moshe Rabbeinu? If the Eibishter wants a dira b'tachteinim, this should be the ratzon of the Baditchever also, adasof. So why is it dafke the business or the union, the ultimate want of the Moshe Rabbeinu, the one Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbe?
Again, I don't know why the seventh. Why was Moshe Rabbeinu? He couldn't make a Mishkan. Avram couldn't build a Mishkan. Yosef couldn't build a Mishkan. He built pyramids. he couldn't build a Mishkan. When all the brothers came down, they couldn't build a Mishkan. Okay, it wasn't the right place. It wasn't the right what. But why Dafka the seventh? I don't know. What is the seventh?
No, I wasn't asking Dafka about the seventh. I was about if just what you're telling me now that the Eibishter, but that is the Baditchever, Chilik, the difference between Baditchever and the Rebbe was probably true between the Baditchever and the Alter Rebbe also, as the Rishon, not just Dafka the Shvi.
Yeah. So why is there only one Nasi that makes the dira b'tachteinim?
Yeah.
The one who can make the dira b'tachteinim has to be the one that is the highest from the tachteinim. Now it makes sense?
Right.
You have to be so much higher than the Tachten in order to turn the Tachten into a Dira.
Okay.
Like the Eibishter himself. The world can be a dwelling place only to him. A Malach can't stay here. He either gets corrupted or he'll die and run away.
Right. So let me ask you another question, which is of course related to this. So it's clear that the Eibishter Mitzias is that the kesher, a real kesher with Elokus, with the Eibishter, can only happen through a kesher with the Rebbe. He's the one that makes Elokus for you b'muchash. Shaila is, in other words, so in what we're saying is that the Rebbe is a mammoth. Zwischen Tachtenim and Elyenim, zwischen the Eibish beini u benechem. Everyone knows, I mean everyone, but there is a question out there, and it's also explained in the good books and Chassidus and the inyan of a mamutza mechaber. That through this connection, through this kesher with the Rebbe, you become connected to the Eibishter. Fakert, that it's mechaber the yid with the Eibishter. There is such a musig there's a musig of a mamutza mafsik, which probably does the opposite. That there's someone in the middle which separates the two extremes. So Yidden, even from Yidden, who ask the questions to have a mamutza. Why do I need to have a mamutza? Ich can doch have my kesher with the Eibishter, a direct connection to the Eibishter. And how do so really what I'm asking is, what is the difference between a mamutza mechaber and a mamutza mafsik chas v'sholom? And how does that manifest itself?
So first of all, I think that a mamutza hamafsik brings together the two opposites, because it's a mamutza. If it separates them, then it's not a mamutza hamafsik, it's just a hefsik. It's like ava hatluya bedover. What says ava hatluya bedover? So the two people like each other or not? Or they just like the dover? The dover is the dover is mechaber. But it's mechaber by being not this one and not this one. It's neutral. When you're neutral, you can get along. Even opposites can get along if you neutralize. That's called a mamutza hamafsik. Mamutza hamachaber means you are both. You are this and you are that. In other words, the mamutza, in some sense, has to be higher than both. It has to bring out something in each of them that allows them to become one. Again, that's the idea. It has to bring out the Yedid Hashem al Har Sinai, and has to bring out the nefesh, the chelek elokah mimal mamish in the Jew. So it's mechaber by being both, not by being neither. So there are other memutzas. Like, for example, what is the memutza between your nefesh abahamis and your nefesh alikis? You need a memutza there too. So what's the memutza? The nefesh hasichus. It's not a nefesh alikis, and it's not the behemoth. So it's not.
So how does it mechaber? How is a mamutza a mafsik? How does he connect the two if he's neither? Because he's neutral.
Right. objective. Objective. So you're asking, why do you need a mamutza? In everything there is a mamutza. If it's not Moshe Rabbeinu, it's a malach. There are so many madregas, and there are so many levels, that each of the levels needs a mamutza to bring it to the next level. Because everything is made up of top, bottom, and middle. That's a complete unit. So you have the ladder that stands on earth and reaches into heaven. Why do you need a ladder? Why do you need a ladder? Because heaven is heaven and earth is earth. So in everything there's a mamutza. There's nothing that doesn't have a mamutza. According to Kabbalah, even by the Ebershter. There's the Ebershter and there's creation. And then there are the worlds, the heavenly worlds that are the mamutza. But if you see how, why is it that a non-Jew is allowed to believe in shituf, and a Jew is not allowed? So there's a moshel given. If a king has a daughter, and the daughter needs a favor from her father, so she goes to the local minister and puts in her petition. The minister takes it to the higher minister. The higher minister takes it to the viceroy, and the viceroy presents it to the king. The king would be very insulted. What are you mixing in a stranger in a family business? Come talk to me. But if you're not the daughter, and you go talk to the king, achas dosei, you got to go through channels. Or say you're going to go talk to a king. You got to talk to the minister. He'll take it to the next minister. So if you're in the family, then it's wrong to use a mamutza, right? Because it's a family. Now, what happens if the king's daughter needs something from her father, and she asks her sister, who is the king's favorite, the Muzinik, that she should ask, because she always gets what she wants? Would that be offensive? That'd be called shituf. It's not shituf for a very simple reason. The sister is not a stranger to the princess, and she's not a stranger to the king. That's a mamutza hamachber. I belong to the king and I belong to you. Where's the stranger here? So to say a Jew is not allowed to go to another Jew to ask, what are you talking about? Fakert. When the father sees that the sisters are working for each other, that's the biggest tainuk. So the bottom line is this. You can think, I'm a makusher, I'm not a makusher. I want to be a makusher. I want to get closer. I want to be better. Who knows? Take time out for a couple of years and figure out what you really want. But the Rebbe considers you his chassid, without doubts and without questions and without sreikas. From his side, you are a chassid. Especially because he's going to have to answer for you. He's going to take responsibility. And if you do good, when they ask the Rebbe, what have you accomplished? What is he going to point to? He's going to point to you. What else can he do? You're his generation. He is responsible for you. And whatever you are, either you're to his credit or to his responsibility. So the point is, with a Rebbe of your generation, it's radically different than Even the Friedrich Rebbe, never mind the Alter Rebbe. So when you go to the oil, you're not walking into a strange, distant, holy place. You're coming to where you are needed, to where you are expected. It's a very different. To go to the oil in Mezhebush, boy, you better check yourself. Make sure you're. Where are you going? Not because the Baal Shem Tov is holier. I don't know who's holier. But the Baal Shem Tov is not waiting for you to come. And the Rebbe is. So it's a very different thing. And the void, and I remember this very, very, very emotional, inspiring moment. If you remember, the Rebbe was teaching the Nigun, Stavya Pitu. And it was Ukrainian, the words. So even the Russian Chassidim, they didn't get it. They didn't catch the Nigun. And the Rebbe kept saying by the Fabrengen Shabbos, after Simchas Torah, they were trying to remember the Nigun to sing it, and the Rebbe said, nobody speaks Ukrainish. Nobody, no. Right next to me on the table, this guy gets up. He was a Russian, a recent immigrant, who knew very little. He was a roofer, a very strong, physical, peasant type. They knew him from Russia, and they were makar of him. But he was very real. So they asked him to put on tefillin. He was masculine. A talis? No. No. Halt nicht bei dem. Interesting. Anyway, at that Fabrengen, that days he took a little mashke. He gets up on the table and he says in a booming voice, he says, L'chaim Rebbe, ihr seid mein Rebbe. And it was so intense, it was so personal. The Rebbe was a little like, whoa, heavy. And finally the Rebbe said to him, but do you speak Ukrainish? Wanted to lighten it up a little bit. Mein Rebbe. I don't know what a Rebbe is, he was saying. Was weiß ich what a Rebbe. But you're mine. And what made him feel that way? His deep understanding of Siddhis and what a Neshama Klolis means? No. The Rebbe made him feel welcome. The Rebbe said, Du bist meiner. And he was sensitive enough to feel it, and he responded.